Hi, good morning. We are reading The Mystery of History, Volume 4. We're on page 86, and we have reached Beethoven, Ludwig von Beethoven. We just finished. Do you remember who we were talking about? William Wilberforce and his fight to end the slave trade in England, and I'm not sure if it was called England or Britain. And we had discussed that he was not able to do that in America because the Americans had already separated from England and Britain. It's confusing to me when they're England and when they're Britain.
They're the same nation.
Cruz, that's too loud. England is a part of Great Britain, I think. And I think it's called the United Kingdom now instead of Britain. But I'm not really for sure. All right, so we're in 1808. Of all the classical composers, Cruz, I want you to open that thing up and leave it open. And play quietly, please. Of all the classical composers of the 1800s, Ludwig von Beethoven was one of the more complicated. She uses the terms in quotations like this. Complicated. I say that because he was a man of many extremes. Many extremes. What loves the extreme? I say this often. The flesh swings to the extremes. Beethoven was talented but touchy, ambitious but bossy. I don't think those are extremes. I think those are kind of
opposites.
No, I think they kind of go along. Ambitious and bossy, talented and touchy. It's kind of, I don't think they're extremes. Artistic but depressed, accomplished but messy. Unfortunately, he was gifted with the finest ear for music, but he suffered deafness. For a composer, little could be more maddening than not being able to hear, and it's no wonder he was complex. I'll address his struggles first and his successes second. His struggles. He was born in Bonn, Germany, or maybe it's Bonn, I'm going to say Bonn, in 1770. That's the same year as the Boston Massacre. Okay, so that's good to know. Kind of what was going on at the same time that the Boston Massacre was going on. Beethoven was born. He wasn't born with the inclination to perform like Mozart was. At 4 years old, Ludwig was forced to sit at the keyboard for long hours at a time, squirming as most children would. His teacher, who was also his father, drank heavily and leaned on his son to help pay the family bills. At 4 years old. Is that his responsibility?
No, his responsibility.
Not even for a long time. All right. By age 7, young Beethoven was performing in public and receiving wages. As a youth, he struggled with having little to no social graces. His appearance was usually disheveled, his demeanor awkward. As a young man and throughout his life, he suffered rejection from women that he loved. Through letters of uncertainty, he bared his tender heart. The most famous of these letters was to a woman he called his immortal beloved. Nobody is our immortal beloved except for Jesus. Her identity is unknown, and the letter was never mailed. By his own admission, Beethoven remained an unhappy bachelor. That means he wasn't...
Who's the immortal beloved?
That means she will live forever as his beloved. He's raised her, though, to a status that is above people, is above a person, like almost like a godlike status. That's why I was saying your immortal beloved should only be Jesus. He said he was an unhappy bachelor, meaning that he never married. He was single. But more sorrowful was his loss of hearing. His deafness came on slowly, starting in his late 20s, with humming in his ears. Beethoven was afraid that others would dismiss him as not being a serious musician and composer, so he hid the problem as much as he could. Unfortunately, Beethoven's growing deafness made him increasingly grumpy. He defended his shortcomings when he wrote, "Oh, you who think or say that I am malevolent. Malevolent. Malevolent, stubborn, misanthropic. How greatly do you wrong me?" I'm sorry, babes. I don't know really the meanings of those words. I have to look them up after we press stop here. "You do not know the secret cause which makes me seem that way to you. Ah, how could I possibly admit an infirmity in the one sense which ought to be more perfect in me than in others, a sense which I once enjoyed in the highest perfection?" Beethoven's secret torment of silence increased with age. At concerts, he leaned as far forward as he could to sort out muzzled sounds. Eventually, he gave in to inventive hearing devices like ear horns and tools that would vibrate from sound. It was only when complete deafness set in, when he was around 48, that Beethoven resorted to communicating with others through conversation books. There still exist over 100 of these books. The pages are like a peculiar set of windows, allowing us to peer into Beethoven's quiet world. I wonder what they were, because she doesn't really say. One of the amazing things about Beethoven is that he composed 9 symphonies, his greatest works, with only a faint ability to hear, or with no hearing at all. 8 were composed with partial deafness. The 9th and last he would never hear, but it has remained his most famous. The long, astounding 9th Symphony contains bold music and the familiar choral Ode to Joy, a universal masterpiece in and of itself. The 3rd Symphony was originally written in honor of Napoleon Bonaparte, but when Napoleon began to show himself as a tyrant, Beethoven erased his name from the work. Of all the symphonies, you're probably most familiar with Beethoven's 5th, which premiered in 1808, the date I chose for this lesson. We still hear the 5th Symphony today in performances, commercials, and cartoons with the famous dun 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 dun. I had to figure it out because I can't. She's trying to write it here. Another musical score of Beethoven's you may recognize is the hymn "Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee." Joyful, joyful, we adore thee.
I'm not familiar with that at all.
Henry Van Dyke, an American author, wrote this as a poem in 1907, and it was set to the rolling melody of Beethoven's Ode to Joy. For the piano, Beethoven composed Für Elise. We've listened to that before. A very well-known piece to most piano students. It's the only, Miss Hobart says, it's the only thing I have memorized from my childhood piano lessons. Für Elise, which translates as For Elise, may have been written for a woman Beethoven loved, but no one knows for sure. Otherwise, Beethoven composed 6 concertos, 32 sonatas, and 32 sonatas for the piano. The piano was still somewhat new at this time, and Beethoven helped make it famous. His most admired sonatas would include Pathétique, Appassionata, Farewell, and Moonlight. The slow and rolling first movement of Moonlight Sonata is most well known and is my favorite piece of Beethoven. Each of these sonatas and its movements is completely different, representing the wide range of talent and emotion Beethoven possessed. Some would say that Beethoven broke tradition to reinvent beautiful music. When a musical score was expected to be loud, he made it soft. When it was meant to be soft, he made it loud. Now, he wrote only 1 concerto for the violin and only 1 opera, but his string quartets and everything else he composed are extraordinary to this day for provoking deep feelings. Unlike Bach, Beethoven would reap the benefits of his fame in his lifetime. His peers found him hard to get along with, but he was another composer. We'll have to go back and look in just a minute. Beethoven's peers, that means other musicians kind of along that are in his time, found him hard to get along with, but they and his audiences greatly appreciated his classical style. Though many famous composers followed him, he's the last of the classical composers that Miss Hobart says she'll cover. Beethoven was well paid for his hard work. And when he died at 56, there were an estimated 20,000 mourners gathered at his funeral.
To mourn.
Yeah, to mourn. His final resting place was the Central Cemetery in Vienna, near other leading composers. Is there more I can add to this story? Certainly there is much more I could say, but I would rather you listen to Beethoven's work than listen to me further on the subject. His classical works will continue to speak for themselves. Here's a picture of his memorial stone. He passed away at 56 and was buried at the Central Cemetery that says Beethoven. That looks to be in German. Yeah, that's in German.
So that means it's in Germany.
Vienna.
No, that's Italy. That's
No.
Italy?
No. Okay, let's stop there and then we'll look on the map. All right, bye.